Hi, welcome. This is Margarita Cardenas, your host with Urban Traditions. And we're here back once again, and we have Kathy Crane from the Yerba Buena Native Plants Nursery. And she's going to educate us a little more on native plants and how we can, for those of us that don't have a large space, how we can garden on containers. Besides that, we have a quaint little story about the manzanita and how it was saved from extinction by construction workers. And for those of us that have some space in our gardens, Kathy is going to explain to us how we can design, as she likes to put it, with exclamation points. Well, Kathy, hi.
How are you? I'm fine. I'm so glad to be back. Thank you for having me and for letting me bring a few plants.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for coming. It's always nice to see you. And, well, to start off, Kathy, I'll just have to tell you, it was a beautiful drive down to Highway 35. And you can see the Yerba Buena signage right off Highway 35 going to Woodside. And it's still a little ways away from the highway as you get to her property. And it's gorgeous, of course, and it was a lovely, lovely day, just sunny, and it's been such wonderful weather. But now let's start with our story about the manzanita and how it was saved from extinction by these construction workers. Can you tell us a little bit?
Sure. Well, when you were at the nursery, you might have seen in our garden the Franciscan manzanita, and that's the particular manzanita that has quite a unique story behind it. Now, we have a specimen of this plant growing in our garden that we got many years ago, and it came from the Laurel Hill Cemetery in San Francisco. And it was the last remaining known plant, and when that cemetery was removed, there were no more Franciscan manzanitas thought to be left in San Francisco or anywhere in the wild. And when the recent Golden Gate Bridge construction was happening, and they were building and destroying and kind of excavating for the Doyle Drive part of it, a construction worker noticed a very unusual plant sort of among some weeds. And it turned out that it was a Franciscan manzanita, which was the plant that was thought to have been extinct. So a series of wheels went into operation to try and save that plant. And what they had to do to move it was extraordinary and cost quite a bit of money, well over $200,000. In the middle of the night, they came with crews and cranes. They dug out this big manzanita and they moved it to an undisclosed location, replanted it somewhere in the Presidio, and are hoping they can get it to survive. And so far, it's doing well from what we understand.
Amazing. But if you're interested to get the manzanita, now it's at Yerba Buena Nursery.
You can get it from us. We do propagate it at our nursery, and it's a beautiful plant. It grows it's a short plant, just a few feet high, but it can spread up to 10 feet or more. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's lovely. And it is a low-growing shrub, correct?
It's a low-growing shrub, almost a ground cover, and it doesn't need any water once it's established. And because it has this strong connection with San Francisco and the coastal environment, it would grow beautifully in anyone's garden who lives along the coastline.
Wonderful. It's really vital that we propagate all these native plants for ecological balance. Well, now let's go into color and container gardening. And for those that want to encourage native plants in container gardening, yes, you can do it. And we have some examples here of the monkey plant. Mm-hmm. And explain to us, you have some different colors, and what colors do they come?
Well, first of all, monkey flower is known as mimilus, and there are many colors of mimulus. Our nursery happens to specialize in this plant, and I consider it the best color plant that's in the native family. It gives you the most longest blooming color in summer and the greatest variety of colors. And it's really easy to grow. So even if you don't have a yard with soil, you can take this plant, put it into a container. In fact, I brought just a container to show you what size you might need. And you can grow it for many years in a container quite successfully. So some of the colors I brought today are really fabulous. This is an ivory one in the front here, ivory or white. The main color you tend to find monkey flowers usually are in yellow tones, which are nice, bright, and cheerful. So this is one of the yellows.
Beautiful.
There's an orange one in the front row, a deep red over here. This is a pink one. And then this is apricot. And if you notice, the edge of this flower is a little bit ruffled, which makes it unique. So all of these mimulus or monkey flowers would be really successful in a pot. And what you would do when you potted it is to be sure you have a good drainage hole in the bottom of your pot, because most native plants are extremely particular about drainage. They don't need a lot of water, but they do need to be watered, especially in a pot. And the water needs to pass through the soil and come out. So having a good drainage hole would be important with your monkey flower. And then secondly, you'd want to put it out in the sun, because in order to bloom, these monkey flowers need to be in the sun. And at the end of the blooming season, here, for instance, this is the apricot monkey flower. You would want to clip off this plant at the spent blooms. When these turn brown, just clip off below the bloom, and that way the plant has a chance to either bloom again, or it will be dense enough that when it does grow back the following year, it won't be real leggy.
Right. Well, I did see in your nursery the elaine. I love the story you told me about this elaine. This is a special variety of monkey flower. Tell us how the elaine came to be, and it was given its name at Yerba Buena Nursery.
Right. It's actually Eleanor.
Oh, Eleanor, sorry.
It's a girl. Yeah, she's a girl. So anyway, the Eleanor is a yellow monkey flower with a beautiful white edge, and it blooms usually twice a year, which is extraordinary. And the flowers usually bloom in pairs, which is really nice. And Eleanor was one of the workers at Yerba Buena Nursery many years ago who was living in one of the little cottages there on the property. And she discovered growing next to her door this beautiful monkey flower, and it was unlike any of the monkey flowers that had ever been seen before. And it turned out that it was a monkey flower that had just crossed itself with another monkey flower and produced this exceptional size of a bloom and color. And it's now one of the most popular monkey flowers in the trade or in people's gardens. And as you say, it did originate right at Yerba Buena Nursery.
Lovely, lovely monkey flower. Well, I'd like to share with everyone a little folk tale or old wives' tale about the monkey flower. Well, according to old wives' tales, the monkey flower was used as a salt substitute for the Native Americans because, well, as you know now that it's originated here in California, and back in the day it was used as salt substitute, and that it's edible. Did you know that, Kathy?
Well, you certainly can eat any of these. In fact, they'd be beautiful on a plate. But I did not know that it was used for salt. That's quite interesting.
Yes, yes.
I'll have to try it.
Yes, I think so. Well, now, besides the monkey flowers, there is the native plant, the irises, which I did not know that California had a native iris. Because like most people, I've always thought that those were non-native and they come from Holland. Tell us about the different varieties you have in your nursery.
Right. Well, we have the Douglas iris, which is a really beautiful wild iris, and it grows locally. So if you were to take a hike and perhaps be in a shady area or at the edge of a meadow, you might see the Douglas iris blooming. The flowers are usually blues and purples, and they're a small flower. Most people are familiar with the tall Japanese iris, but the Douglas iris will be a short plant, and very intense blues and purples. Small flowers, but a lot of them.
Oh, and but that's the only one you have?
Well, that's the most typical one that you would see growing wild locally. But we also have Pacific Coast iris, and I believe you might have seen some of the large white ones called Canyon Snow, or perhaps the yellow or ruby ones that we had growing.
That's the ones I saw, mostly the yellow ones and then the rubies, and I did see some of those purple.
That's right, and those, there are even purple Pacific Coast iris as well.
So those are Pacific Coast irises. Wonderful. Yeah, those are the purple is my favorite.
And they make a great cut flower too.
Yes, yes, and they still blooming there because some irises have already gone.
Ours are still blooming.
Yes, well, nice to know. Now, so these are all the types of flowers that can be potted in containers, but they do need to be watered, as she said. They are drought tolerant, correct?
Yes, sometimes people will read information about a California native plant and see that it says no summer water. That means if the plant's in the ground, because in the ground the root system spreads out and eventually doesn't need any more water. But in a pot, you will always need to water it, although perhaps not as much as a non-native plant.
Right. Well, now let's get into these, the Festuca californica, and that's the bunch grass. For native plant enthusiasts, you know that you need to have some pollinators and some insect repellers, and these are especially good for that, correct, Kathy?
That's right, yeah. The bunch grasses as a category, they're great for a number of reasons. First of all, they attract beneficial insects, as you were pointing out. Secondly, they're really great for erosion control. So if you have a slope that's moving or crumbling, and a lot of coastside properties would have those, by planting bunch grasses, you can have an extensive root system underground in a very short time, and that can help with erosion control. And I like to use the bunch grasses to provide a sort of a different leaf shape in a design setting, and as you pointed out, as an exclamation point.
Exactly. We're going to get into that, but we do have a question from one of our viewers, or actually a Half Moon Bay resident. Let's go to our tape and to Peggy. She has a question for Kathy.
Plant can grow best in cold weather because we have a really hard time with that in school.
So you prefer flowers or vegetables?
Probably vegetables. That's what most of the time we grow, because agriculture. Yeah.
Right. What plants grow better in the cold weather?
Well, first of all of these plants grow well along the coast, and although there are no native vegetables, as Peggy was asking about, there are many of our plants that do produce fruit. So we have currants, flowering currants, for instance, or huckleberries, thimbleberries, and a lot of herbal kind of things like the Yerba Buena that I brought today.
Right, your namesake, the Yerba Buena. Yeah, because we can make tea from this.
Well, this is actually a mint. It's a trailing mint. If you rub the leaf and you smell it, doesn't that smell fantastic?
I love the smell. Yeah,
there's really no comparing it to a regular mint, but you can use this either fresh or dried as a tea, or even as an ingredient in your cooking, if you would.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And it's trails. I loved what you had in the, yes. Because you can combine some of these, right? You can
use this at the edge of a pot to kind of cascade down, or at the edge of a planter box to give a little softening of the edge. So, and this plant would grow very well just as a ground cover as well.
Right. And it just looks so, well, it's different than the regular peppermint that we see, but it's got that familiar, but this is much stronger. The aroma is so much more stronger. Yes. Well, now let's get into, for those of us that want to design, that have a large lawn and want to design with the exclamation points, because you do want to attract pollinators and butterflies, hummingbirds, and ladybugs, because those are beneficial. I just saw a ladybug over here a little while ago. And can you explain to the different types of bunch grass and how you, because as you said, the native plants, they're different types of green, and that's how you can design with these different types of greens.
That's right. Every plant will have a different leaf color and shape, and so when you're designing, you want to combine leaf colors, and the leaf colors can range from green to gray to blue, and the same with the grasses. Many of our bunch grasses are a lime green or a silvery gray or a bluish color. And when you use some of those different hues, you end up with a much more interesting design.
Exactly. And it can be done in the edge. I saw how beautifully you had the those bunch grasses, because as you see, these are the seedlings, right?
The seed heads are now forming on the grasses, and the seeds are not just for show, although they're very showy. For instance, here where it's windy, if you were to plant a bunch grass, those seed heads would sway in the wind, and it would give your garden some life and some motion. And they could certainly take the wind quite well. But those seed heads are also food for birds, and they provide some wildlife value. Well, the core of the grass is good for butterfly larvae, for instance.
Oh.
And also for beneficial insects to live in.
Right. Well, besides the this beautiful nursery that Kathy has, she also does special events there. You have a storefront there, and she sells tea service. And tell us a little bit. I know you have your tea parties there, or what would you like to call them?
Well, the core of our nursery is the garden that you came to visit.
Right.
And many gardens attract people by offering a little food and then a time to wander through the garden. And we've tried to do that, to give our garden visitors a chance to sit down and think about what they've seen and maybe visit with their friends. We serve tea about once a month in our farmhouse to our garden visitors. It's by reservation, and this is based on something that I observed when I would go to gardens in England. I'd go to a garden, and after a nice walk through the garden, I'd like a cup of tea.
Yeah.
So we offer this as well.
Yes, lovely. And those tea sets, those are all for sale there.
We have a garden shop, and in our garden shop we sell tea-related items and a lot of collectibles, things that you might find at an old farm, of which Yerba Buena is an old dairy ranch.
Exactly. Tell us a little bit more. I mean, I'd love to know about that history of that farmhouse, because that's the older
That's right. Yeah, the farmhouse dates to 1905. So well over 100 years old. And there aren't that many buildings, I think, left in California, especially not in the Bay Area, that are really that old, that haven't been demolished or such. So we're really proud to have an old farmhouse and an old barn.
Yeah.
And the barn was where they milked the cows, and now we store the tractor there.
Oh.
And so what we've tried to do in our garden shop and throughout the property is to give our customers a sense of what it was like to be on a farm in those days. What kind of equipment did they use? We've got milk cans and old tools and even the old stoves from the farmhouse are in our garden shop.
Oh.
So you can see how they cooked on wood stoves.
Yes, I did see some of those in there. And you're going to have a tour, a farmhouse garden tour with the Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce.
The Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce in July is having their annual Tour de Fleur, and you can call them and sign up for a tour that would include Yerba Buena Nursery, You visit 3 flower growing properties and get to talk with the owners, learn a little bit about what's behind the scenes of running a flower growing operation, and decide maybe if you want to do that yourself.
Exactly. Well, I'd love to come by again and check out the farm. Well, that was lovely. And those rhododendrons, Hannah, how old are those rhododendrons?
Oh gosh, well, first of all, the oaks on the property are hundreds of years old. The rhododendrons are probably 60, 70 years old.
Wow.
And they're huge.
They're huge. I never knew that they flowered. I've always seen them just green. So that was a very nice surprise to see the beautiful majesty of those beautiful blooms. And so I suggest that everyone try to go to the garden tour and check out the farmhouse. And we did see some footage that the regular visitors will not be able to see. The property adjacent to yours was huge also. My goodness, yes. And but that's all the time we have for you today. I'd like to thank Kathy for coming once again and educating us on all of these native plants. We really need to propagate native plants more, help our wildlife, help our native species. And please befriend us on Facebook. Send us those questions. If you want to see old episodes, we're all on YouTube. Just put in Urban Traditions. Send us those questions. Thank you, Kathy, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And happy gardening, everyone.